Florida State and Clemson are joining the Big 12. Is that a true statement, a false statement, or why are we even making that statement? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day. That is Nathan Bomber Brown joining the show from Big 12 Mafia, always bringing the house down when it comes to Big 12 news on this show. We'll talk Florida State, Clemson to the Big 12. First and foremost, is it a thing? What's going on? Second most, why those two schools probably won't love the move. And we'll finish the show with Louisville, Miami. Who else does this wake up? Nathan, off the riff here, I want to take my tinfoil hat off and bid you adieu. We brought it up. Well, Brett Murphy said a couple months ago that there was an emergency scenario where Clemson and Florida State go to the Big 12. I laughed. Most people laughed. We kind of put it to the side. You looked at it from a journalistic standpoint, and now when we wake up today on July 12th, now the murmur is from Ross Dellinger, hey, there are third-party talks going on between those two schools and this conference. First and foremost, as plain as I can put it, what the hell is going on right now?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the show, Drake. It's always good to be here. At the end of the day, all we do on my show and my team, we just follow the breadcrumbs, right? And then we're a bunch of intelligent guys that track all the news and then try to put it into what for us is a historical context. We look back decades to see how things work out. And it was just, look, the Ross Dellinger thing yesterday was just confirmation of something that everybody had suspected for months and months and months. These third-party talks happened with the Pac-12 schools, and there certainly have been happening once Florida State declared they're out. Unless somebody had written them a check for the SEC or the Big Ten, they had to be looking at other options just in case. Do they go independent? Do they do football only and leave basketball and everything in the ACC? Do they renegotiate their ACC deal? So for us, and me specifically, I'll speak for myself, 3 months ago it came out, a nightmare scenario may be they have to fall down, and what would be the Big 12 would be the last thing standing, right? But at the end of the day, Ross Dellinger comes out and says, well, now they're talking, but that doesn't mean they're going to the Big 12. These headlines are silly. At the end of the day, the Big Ten and the SEC are 1 and 2. In any order that you want to put them. I think most of their elites would like to go to the Big Ten. But we're now hearing that maybe those relationships just haven't been built. Maybe they're not deep enough to go to the Big Ten. Then you have the trouble with the SEC. You have the old politics, the old politicking in the 20 and 30 years with Bobby Bowden. And maybe they're not so much liked in the SEC, and those doors are sort of shut. So now this is the question I put on Twitter today, late this afternoon, is, look, say the nightmare happens and FSU and Clemson are sitting there holding the bag, and the SEC and Big Ten, neither one send them an invite. They have to make a decision. They either go independent and wipe their hands of anything else. They fall back to the ACC, eat some humble pie, and maybe re-engage, knowing that in the future they could probably get out later. Or the third option, which is the Big 12, and that's what Ross said. Basically, you have to find somewhere to go, and the Big 12 would give safety and security. It would give them a place that they could just hang out for a few years, and then once the next Big 12 media deal is negotiated, 2030, 2031, maybe even before that, once the Big 10 and the ACC want to grow more, then they can move on. And at that point, then the Big 12 has been a beneficiary of them being in the conference for a while. The entire conference is elevated with recruiting and all those other things that Matt Baker mentioned in his article yesterday, Tampa Bay Times. And now where we are today is I realize the frustration. You know, I've seen a lot of the blowback, but I have friends that are FSU creators. I have friends that I've spent real time and energy working with them for those relationships. I care where they're going to end up. Right. I want them in the SEC if the Big Ten's not going to be there. I'm on record saying that. But if the SEC doesn't present an option for them, in my opinion, you have a choice. It's start. Go back to the ACC and have them chew you up, have the Wake Forest of the world make fun of you, or go to the Big 12 knowing that it's a parking lot.
Wow. Having this conversation, I almost get chills. How? Right. From a Big 12 standpoint, 4 years ago, conference is done. Yes. That's the headline. The Big 12's done. And today it's, look, now are you a life raft? Can you become a life raft for two of the biggest brands in the country that are being very well valued in expansion, but because of little like these details that from the SEC and Big Ten could bar them from those two conferences. And of course, Brett Yormark is right there playing. He's got a hell of a poker face, by the way. The guy is he just went through media days. And now from John Kurtz, his original report with Ross Dellinger, the preliminary talks between the conference and those two, it's at least on the table. What does it say, Nathan, about the Big 12?
Well, you just said it right there. Brett Yormark is the evil genius behind the curtain. None of this is happening without Brett Yormark. And at the end of the day, the Big 12 is just putting themselves in a position to be successful. He's putting the conference in an area where if the schools want to step up and make really challenging, but maybe revolutionary choices like private equity to invest to help buy out schools from a conference they don't want to be in for a short-term gain. And then in that, there's some chart, some mechanism in the money that says over 5 or 6 years, most of that private equity gets paid back. And now all of a sudden you're not leveraged again because you were able to take advantage of Clemson and Florida State. And let's add Louisville. Let's add Miami. You bring those four schools. Those four schools by themselves, in my opinion, immediately the deal jumps to about $50 million. And then where do you go from there? You got the basketball credits and everything else. Now you're not so far behind the SEC.
Nathan, coming up, let's talk why Florida State and Clemson probably didn't expect this and probably don't want it if they actually got their way right here on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team, and it is every day. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Look, I got a car outside. It's Nissan Maxima 2016. It's like a plus or whatever they call it. It's like the cool version. It's got like 7 dents on the bumper because I work for a baseball team and the baseballs hit it. I go to eBay Motors. I say, eBay Motors, I'm not a car guy. Show me bumpers for a 2016 Nissan Maxima. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and bumpers. eBay Motors has got you covered to keep your ride or die alive. I go to eBay Motors. eBay Motors shows me the part, and with their guaranteed fit that's available to U.S. customers, I get a guaranteed fit. With over 122 million parts, they do keep that ride or die alive. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts that you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP. Again, keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Nathan Brown of Big 12 Mafia joining Locked On Big 12 today. Florida State and Clemson. The original idea when these two teams sued the conference was there's got to be a landing spot in either the Big 10 or the SEC. They're not doing this to explore an option of the Big 12. They're not doing it to be independent. They are looking for the big money in the Big 2. If that's not on the table, how big of a loss is that for those two schools?
Well, it's huge. I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars over a period of 10 years. At the end of the day, those numbers don't go away depending on what conference they're in. They're always going to be there, and they're always going to be falling short of the Big 10 and the SEC. Look, I was one of the first people right after the lawsuit came out in December. In my opinion, if they could have struck oil right that second and gotten out of the ACC within a month or two, I still think the Big 10 would have taken them. I think the problem they're running into is the longer you stretch out these negotiations, not even negotiations, because they can't be first party because of all the tortuous interference and doing other things legally. They can't specifically talk to the Big Ten until they leave the ACC, technically. So they've had to use third people moderators to do that. And in that process, it hasn't gone so well. Similar to what we heard, what happened with Oregon. If Washington hadn't greased the skids for Oregon, they do not get in the Big Ten. It's the exact same thing here. Maybe there's some relationship challenges. I don't know from firsthand. I don't know these people that are working on it, but you hear enough from people that I do trust, reporters, writers, people in social media that I've come to trust. Those relationships are really, really critical, and maybe they're not all the way filled out, right? And the reason that happened is because it just stretched out too long. The ACC strategy all along was to extend Florida State and Clemson to a point where they either give up or they just leave and write them a check. ACC's in this to win it because, honestly, the ACC, it's an all or nothing. If Florida State and Clemson are able to get out for $200 million or less, the conference is over. writ large, every school for $200 million will leave, because even joining the Big 12 over a period of decades, years, you're still going to get more money if you end up leaving. So at the end of the day, the ACC is in real trouble if they let them go for less than, I think Wild Utes number was about $300 million. If they get $300 million for every school that leaves the ACC, and that's marginal, but the ACC is strong enough, they could backfill and still stay a power conference. But at the end of the day, Clemson and Florida State don't want to be there. I honestly think they deserve better. I wanted them in the Big Ten. I think an SEC, maybe a half share, is the next thing that I would look for. Maybe ESPN's using this leverage, this story with Brett Yormark, to drive down what their expectations are, because I think they want a full share to join the SEC. Maybe they, again, a little humility there. You go in for a half share for 3 or 4 years, and then they get a full share, just like Washington and Oregon.
I know there are plenty of Clemson and Florida State fans that when you hear half share, that's not what they envisioned 6 months ago. That's exactly not what the plan was here in the SEC with the Big Ten. Nathan, It makes me, bear with me a bit here, it makes me think that on the front end, before these two schools put in motion leaving the ACC, which is effectively what they're doing right now, before that was put in motion, they had to expect something. There was an expectation there from the third party that there is a landing spot. It wasn't, we're going to wade in the wilderness and hope to find our way. I don't think it was that much confidence to go into an entire lawsuit process. Does it seem like to you, as it does me, there was a break here somewhere, that these conversations, there was an expectation that was broken, whether it was from the Big Ten or the SEC?
Well, I mean, if you listen to people like Spear Addicts, you watch their show, or you watch Vince Knoll and Big Papa East at their show, Garnet and Old, they were talking about that last summer. Drake. They were talking about that in July. They were talking about that in August of last year. They absolutely did think that they had a landing place, which is why, and put yourself in their shoes. Baylor went through this a little bit, but not near to the extent that Florida State and Clemson. Their future has been given back to them in a mirror, and it looks like a train crash compared to what they thought they were going to be in. I would be upset too. I would be absolutely furious if I'm one of those fans and boosters and like, wait, I'm giving you hundreds of millions of dollars maybe to fight this lawsuit, to represent out in social media, all this infrastructure to plead your case. And at the end of the day, you're fighting against somebody who's a fantastic salesman in Brett Yormark saying, we're here if you need us. And that's not the future they wanted. I agree with you. I think that somebody gave them a wink and a nod. But this intervening time, what has been 7 months, something has changed. And I don't know if we'll ever find out what that was, but I've just been told that relationships matter and humility matters, not going into a room expecting something. And if those expectations, I'm a project manager by trade, and if you start a project and everybody has different expectations, your project's never going to get off the ground. You have to set that baseline, and obviously the baseline was broken. Nathan,
how much leverage is lost right now for these two schools?
I think you hit it. That's exactly right. And it's something I haven't been able to cover on Twitter yet. I'm going to get to it eventually. But this is the problem. Again, listening to those social media spear addicts, I was just listening before we started recording. They're talking about, they expect if they go to the Big 12 to get $60 or $70 million. While everybody else is getting 30 or 25 or whatever. And all I can say is, in a perfect world, that is true, but it's a buyer's market. So you, the seller, you have no power in this because you've been declined by the Big Ten. And if this was the case, you've been declined by the SEC. You don't want to go back to the ACC, and the Big 12's going, we got you, right? The Big 12 can bargain from a position of strength. There's no way they're getting $60 or $70 million. I could see a disproportionate where maybe they get 50, 55, and the Big 12 schools get 35, 40. Yeah, I could see that. And maybe they get to keep their playoff revenue if they qualify for the playoff, and maybe they get to keep their basketball credits if they make the tournament. There's other ways to give them extra money, but it's not going to, in my opinion, I don't see any world, and I've got a call out to Bob Thompson on this. I do not see any world where they would get 60 or 70 million just because that's what they would expect to get in those other two conferences. If they're in the Big 12, they don't have a lot of control.
Leverage is certainly lost compared to where it was 7 months ago for these two schools. Coming up, the Big 12 is in a better spot now than it was 7 months ago, at least in my opinion. Let's see how they can leverage this when it comes to conversations with Louisville, Miami, and others on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, FanDuel is where I go in the middle of the summer when MLB is on, and I say, I don't really like baseball that much. I work for the Savannah Bananas. It's baseball, but at like the highest degree of entertainment. And I watch regular baseball, and I go, oh, this is kind of slow. So what do? I go to FanDuel, and it's not slow anymore, because at FanDuel, I can put $10 in the Texas Rangers to win a baseball game. They've been winning baseball games recently, and if that hits, I get my $10 back or more, depending on what the bet is. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That is right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is where you can go to bet on player props, too. You find your favorite pitcher who pitches in a baseball game, and you say, I think that guy's going to have 7 strikeouts today. You can put some money on it at FanDuel. Your favorite hitter, I think Wyatt Langford is going to have a home run tonight at plus 250. At a $10 bet, gives me $25 when he hits a home run. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Visit FanDuel.com today. Nathan Brown at Big 12 Mafia joining Locked On Big 12. When it comes to Florida State and Clemson to this conference, I'm going to say as of today, July 12th, I do not think that Florida State and Clemson will become members of the Big 12. I don't think that's how this is going to pan out. It's great for me if it does. I wouldn't mind it. What I do think is now, with that conversation at the very least being on the table, a Miami or a Louisville looks up and goes, hey, wait a second. We thought we had leverage. We thought that we were the ones that were going to be putting our money on the table and saying, hey, Big 12, match this. Now, for those two schools, have they lost leverage? And has the Big 12 gained ground in bringing on other ACC programs that might not be named Florida State and Clemson?
Well, I can tell you right now, nobody else is under more demand than Florida State and Clemson. Miami could make a claim from a brand perspective. I know the Big Ten, they're AAU. I could see them going with Georgia Tech if they don't take Florida State and Clemson. Obviously, Notre Dame is the number one, but that's the number one always. That's never going to change. So, in my opinion, if Florida State and Clemson find a way out, whether that's to the Big Ten or the SEC, then what that leaves is Miami and Louisville. And there's not a lot left. Virginia Tech, North Carolina State, you could put Pitt in there, but none of those schools really want to come to the Big 12. To me, in my opinion, Louisville is a slam dunk. If they can get them, and they can get them, even if they use private equity to pay some of their leaving, I think the Big 12 is much better off with Louisville. And yes, the Big 12 obviously has leverage. Right now, I do believe, and I don't want to, I have heard a little bit that there is a possibility that Georgia Tech and Miami might be part of a Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, Stanford. That's something else that we've talked about for over a year, Notre Dame and Stanford. But there are options for the Big Ten. AAU is part of it, the academic stuff. It's not all about football. And there are other options, but right now, the Big 12 has a lot of good opportunities ahead of it.
Nathan, I don't think there's a single Big 12 creator that I have any disrespect for. And look, C.W. Lambert at Inside the Big 12 on Twitter, I've disagreed with before, but he tweets this, and I want to know your opinion on it. Says, his opinion, the leak about the Big 12 talking to Clemson and Florida State was intended to put pressure on Louisville and Miami. Your mark is too smart to let something like that slip. Do you think this actually does put pressure on Louisville and Miami?
I think it puts pressure on all the remaining schools, not just those two.
Okay, good.
Yeah. C.W. Lambert is a friend of mine. We talk, frequently in chat. We do disagree, and I agree with him. I do not think Brett Yormark misspeaks. So if something comes out of his mouth, it's for a reason. Whether he's planting a seed to get leverage for other schools, or he's genuinely trying to put a flyer out there saying, what if, with Clemson and Florida State? But whatever he does, it's always for a reason. And I'll also say this. It's been a while since I've been on your show. But 3 weeks ago, I think it was, there was the leak about private equity and how that might be used by the Big 12. And there were some other quotes that Brett Yormark heard later. And I heard from internal at Big 12 offices, he was pissed that stuff leaked. In my opinion, I believe that's related to the news that we're having bleed out now, that whether it's Florida State, Clemson, Miami, really any school that brings additional value to the conference, I could see them using private equity to leverage that.
Louisville and Miami, for me at the very least, are at the top of the totem pole when it comes to the Big 12's reasonable targets. I know there have been North Carolina has been thrown out of Virginia, and obviously Clemson and Florida State with the Big 10 and the SEC. Very few sources have them tied to the Big 12. Right. If you are Brett Yormark and this conference, who are the four most reasonable ads that, Nathan, you could see in 6 months, a year's time being tied to this league?
I would definitely put Louisville at the top of that list.
Good.
North Carolina and Virginia are not, in my opinion, they're not Big 12. But you could see a Virginia Tech, you could see a North Carolina State. It would be great if you could get a Miami if the Big 10 doesn't take them. In 6 months, you could have 4 more schools believe it or not, it could be North Carolina. It could be Clemson. It could be Florida State. It could be Miami, and it could be Louisville. Could you imagine a world where now that's actually on the table? And I will say this to people who get upset with me even proposing those ideas. One, I'm just looking ahead. That's my opinion. I'm not predicting the future. These are things that I think might happen.
I'm going to give you a bit more credit here, and I hate to cut you off, but looking ahead with historical context. I mean, You're not just spitting stuff out here. You're looking ahead with historical context still in mind.
Well, and I would say that my judgments and prognostication now is based on a year and a half of the Pac-12 burn into the ground.
Correct.
And it was done the exact same way. And oh, by the way, who is in the background stirring the pot? We're open for business, Brett Yormark. Yeah. So he already killed one conference, right? For all intents and purposes, the minute USC left, the conference was dead. But Brett Yormark came along and put a bullet in the back of their head. Now we're looking forward, and all these Pac-12 people that are now more friends of mine are saying, "Hey, we just saw this movie. This is the exact same thing. The messaging last year, Big 12 Media Days, was exactly the same. It was about the Pac-12. So what's to say he's not doing that for the exact same reason? If you're just putting your head in the sand, like I will say, some Pitt fans have just not been able to see the future. And a lot of people are going to come at me, but they've probably been the ones that have been the most head in the sand. Just no possibility. It will never happen. Tony Altimore.
That's are you referencing Pitt fans or Utah fans? We've seen this song and dance from different fan bases.
I actually said they're equals. I said Utah fans and Pitt fans, but now Utah fans have seen the light, right? Now they're on this side of it, and they're like, yes, let's eat up the ACC. Let's get all these schools, and they don't care. There's no personalities involved. It's not personal. It's all about business. And this is for me. It's for you. It's for all the Big 12 fans. We want our conference to be stronger. The best way to do it is to eat alive the ACC.
That is, and I love, that is so astute that you bring up the way Brett Yormark approached it this week at Big 12 Media Days, because last year there was no inclination from his speech that Colorado was on the table. He knew in his back pocket, he had certainly one, very likely 4 schools ready to come to the league, and did not give any solid impression during media days other than we're open for business. And this year, a lot of the same rhetoric of when the time is right, we will expand when the time is right, when things are right. And it looks like that time's getting pretty good. Time's getting pretty good in the Big 12. Nathan, I know you've been covering this so closely for years now. Where can people find more of your work?
First, really quick, I wanted to say one other thing. If you're a Florida State or a Clemson fan, you guys have nothing but good future ahead of you. Whether it's the SEC or the Big 10, you're set, right? There's nothing to worry about. If you end up making a decision to go into any other league, and let's just say that any other league would be the Big 12, I guarantee you it won't be a negative experience. If the only trouble you'll have in the league is that it's in your head, it's about what you're doing to yourselves. You could get to the tournament every year. You could qualify every year in the basketball tournament in the best basketball league in the country. And then you are ready now to jump in 4 or 5 or 6 years to the Big 10 or the SEC after you build up those relationships a little bit more. And you guys are going to do a bang up job. You're not going to get any grief from anybody in the Big 12. And I think it'd be a lot of fun. Anyway,
a lot of immediate respect. I'll go to caveat. A lot of immediate respect would come from the fan bases to Clemson and Florida State if that is the eventual move into the Big 12. But Nathan, again, where can folks find more of your work?
Yeah, sorry about that, Drake. I apologize. At B12 Mafia or at the College Football Mafia, CFB Mafia. On YouTube, it is Big 12 Mafia or College Football Mafia. And we have a bunch of different shows, a lot of different characters. Moen and Wild Ute are my direct partners. I really appreciate them. Rock and Ran is a stud, and we've got a great team. And boy, Drake, you're the one who's setting the pace for us. We really appreciate all your support. Always a lot of entertaining content coming out of you and your team. That is Nathan Brown of Big 12 Mafia. This has been and always will be. Come back on Monday because things are about to get crazy. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande. Peace.